and John and this conference and what they've created here in Boston. Guys, great job. Well done. Thank you for having us. Really well done. Okay? So when Paul asked me to program a panel for this year's conference, I had no preconceived notions of who I would want to bring on the panel, right? And what we were looking for was the antithesis of companies doing pilot theater or in pilot hell. And so my mandate was, can I identify some visionary early adopters who embraced generative AI well ahead of the pack and went through a very disciplined process to scale globally. And so we have 3 representatives today. Monica Caldas, the global CIO of Liberty Mutual, who also was named the MIT CIO of the Year 2025, amongst many other awards that she deservingly has been given. Brionna Jimerson, who is VP of Product Marketing within JPMorgan and has been an instrumental part of their LLM Suite team that has won an American Banker Innovation Award. And Josh Gagne, who's been doing AI for a long time in his role as a research scientist and as the head of epidemiology at Johnson & Johnson, but he also co-chairs the Global AI Council, okay? So 3 people that, what's remarkable to me is that as an 8-time entrepreneur, I studiously avoided calling on companies in regulated industries. They were late adopters. They were way too conservative. You would run out of cash if all you tried to do was sell into insurance and banking and pharma. Boy, that has changed. And so, Monica, I asked you this question once before. What has happened? Why this inflection point where the 3 of you here are representing sort of the avant-garde of scale, global scale? How did that happen?
Well, maybe I'll set the record straight on insurance first.
Yeah.
Liberty Mutual, we're a 113-year-old company, and I don't know how many of you would say, oh, you're an innovative company. Show of hands. Come on. Okay, so this is important. I'm going to set the record straight.
Please.
We've actually been incredibly innovative in our 113 years. If you know prosthetic arms, for example, the Boston elbow, we were the company that partnered with MIT and surgeons to get that across the finish line. And there's a whole host of other things. In our most recent history, we were, this is the 3rd year that we've been listed as the most innovative company list in Fortune, and then top 10 across the globe on AI utilization by Evident AI. So there's external factors that have, so maybe validation. So hopefully, can I see a show of hands? Do you believe we might be innovative? Okay, come on. I did a good job. So anyway, to your point, I think it makes sense, right? We're regulated. We operate in 28 different countries. So therefore, it is really important for us to make sure that we hold our customers' data with utmost privacy, as well as meet all compliance rules. And when you're thinking about 28 countries, there's a lot.
And you're also regulated state by state.
State by state.
Yeah.
So 28 plus 50.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a lot there, and absolutely right. But as it relates to what we've been doing, and if you think about our cost of goods sold, we don't actually know the cost of goods sold of our product. We have to be predicting the cost based on a lot of data variables. So AI, we've been doing classic AI for, as you might expect, forever.
Right.
And so when we think about where we're headed, Gen AI we just knew, we had conviction that we needed to go to the next arc of this so that we can serve our customers better. So hopefully I will dispel the myth.
Yeah.
And maybe my fellow panelists can help. But just because you're regulated does not mean that you're manageable. Not with Gen AI specifically, especially.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. We're all convinced.
Okay, good.
All right. So Josh, I'm gonna go down to the end of the chair line here and say, you've had a long history with machine learning, predictive analytics, right? Long before Gen AI showed up. So what was it from that previous experience that convinced, again, an iconic 100-plus-year-old company in a super regulated space that there was something there with Gen AI that led you to move so quickly?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks to Paul and the organizers for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah.
I'll start by saying I think that one of the reasons that Johnson & Johnson is where we are with respect to AI is that, just like Monica mentioned, we're a more than 100-year-old company, and innovation has been part of our DNA since the very beginning. We've been using AI, machine learning, data science, intelligent automation in lots of our processes to help solve big healthcare problems on a global scale. Within our epidemiology team alone, we've been using machine learning for decades for predictive analytics and other activities. And importantly, over the last couple of years, what we've realized is that we have a lot of experimentation going on, a lot of pilots, and we've really tried to shift the focus from broad experimentation into focusing on a more strategic approach to scale what works. So it's really within a test, learn, and scale framework. In doing so, we have developed a strategy which we liken to a lighthouse, where at the very top, we have a pillar around really bringing to market products that are AI and data enabled for patients and for our customers in the healthcare systems. In the middle of that lighthouse is using AI in discovery and development, in supply chain, as well as commercialization of those products. And then at the base, it's all of the employee productivity and improving the employee experience. But it's really built then on a foundation of data, technology, and talent. And when we think about examples within each of those three layers, one exciting one at the top is really what we're doing in the context of cardiac ablation for atrial fibrillation, where an electrophysiologist needs to guide a catheter into the left atrium to perform a very precise procedure. And traditionally, the imaging has been two-dimensional, but with a series of two-dimensional ultrasounds, we now can apply in real time deep learning algorithms to reconstruct a three-dimensional model so that the electrophysiologist can, with great precision, guide the catheter to exactly where the procedure needs to be performed. In the middle tier, I'll say that one of the biggest investments that we make in the development process for pharmaceuticals in particular is the large phase 3 studies that allow us to understand the benefits and the safety of our products. Those trials are often global, often involve thousands of patients from multiple countries, and it's a huge investment. But with predictive analytics and machine learning, we've been able to really push the envelope on identifying the sites that are going to provide the highest yield. So where are the sites where the patients are being seen for the conditions that we hope to treat? And if we then do a ranking process through the predictive analytics, we can identify those sites that enable us to recruit our studies more quickly and ultimately reduce the development timelines to get products to patients faster.
Thank you, Josh. So Brionna, JPMorgan, founded in 1799, and obviously the biggest bank in the US, and Jamie Dimon, probably one of the most visible business leaders in the world. And so at the very onset of this Gen AI revolution, Morgan Stanley was making a big deal out of their, how they were arming their wealth managers. Bloomberg was building and training their own model. Moody's came out. Morningstar came out. JPMorgan said, we cannot use Gen AI within the four walls of the business. And then something shifted. And here we are 2 years later, and you have 200,000 plus users of the LM suite. So how did you turn on the turbochargers and go from you were forbidden to use Gen AI to we're now 50% plus adoption within the company?
It's a beautiful question. Thank you. And thank you also to Paul and the GAI World community for having me. I think what's at the base of your question is, why did JPMorgan decide to give the power of AI to the people? And why did they decide to give the people the power at that specific time? Now, JPMorgan, which is, I believe, as you mentioned, the most profitable bank in the US, what they decided around Gen AI at the very beginning was they needed to be in lockstep, not just with regulators in the financial space, but also very forward thinking. So what JPMorgan did was decided to invest its capital, invest its people and its resources into understanding how can Gen AI be valuable for everyone, from asset wealth management down to branches and banks. So at the end of that discussion, LLM Suite was born. It launched internally in 2023. And when you think about ChatGPT, as I mentioned last night, the value there is it made itself a consumer bill in the consumer wallet before it became an enterprise bill within the P&L of companies. So instantly, we have consumers building a vocabulary at the same time as financial leaders. JPMorgan saw that happening and decided that they needed to prioritize the needs of the business while also upskilling the hundreds of thousands of employees. So to your point, today we have 250,000 employees onboarded onto LLM Suite, which incorporates both OpenAI models, Anthropic models, and it has really made JPMorgan really a forward leader when it may seem like in the beginning there was a lot of hesitation. But as a result of that hesitation and that deep work on the data analytics side, on the protection side, the firm has been able to weave AI into the future of how they'll be doing business. And it's truly only the beginning. I cannot stress that enough.
And we're going to talk more about that. Okay,
Yes.
great. So Monica, you used the word conviction earlier.
Oh, yes.
So again, 7 years at Liberty, 4 years as CIO of the retail business, 3 years as global CIO. And you were trained at GE, one of the great management training grounds over the last 2 decades. How did you get conviction, and who else needed to share that conviction with you to move forward?
I think conviction starts from understanding what problems are you solving. And for us, we are a very purpose, mission-based company at the core. And if you think about our products, what we sell, insurance, it might seem, okay, it's a policy, I have a car, but it's so much more than that. And if you look around, events that have happened around the world, for example, the Morocco earthquake in 2023, we were there with our parametric insurance product. And what that means is it gets our customers back on their feet quicker. So the purpose is very meaningful to us. And so back to conviction, we orient it to, well, what problems are we solving? We know risk is going up around the world. We know that we need to think about how might we serve customers better. And so the question internally we were asking ourselves is, okay, the products and services we have and the tools that we use to deploy them, if we now have new tools in the marketplace, how are we using them? And are we going fast enough to shift in how we sell products and services?
Right.
So it started there. That's where the conviction started. It wasn't about, as a CIO, I think sometimes we get excited about shiny objects. And we were very disciplined in saying, this isn't about deploying a tool. It's about a new capability and how might we rewire how we operate. And so that's where the conviction came from. It was a real problem we're trying to solve. That's point one. Number two is, as an enterprise CIO, you have to think about, okay, how do I do this at scale? Right? Because it's very different if you're solving for $1 billion operation versus a $50 billion operation. And so for us, we were thoughtful in having an execution plan that said, okay, what are the fundamentals? What are the foundational capabilities? Infrastructure, your data readiness, your core systems. What are those things that need to be put in place or are in place? What do we need to do? The next step function. The next was about features. Well, what are we deploying? We're very thoughtful in saying, back to the insights that we just heard before, it's not about tool proliferation, it's about platform orientation. Otherwise, you die by 1,000 paper cuts. And it's not productive, and it doesn't help the mission. So capabilities was really important, and then bets, which was, how do we actually place some experiments out there and have them meaningfully connect to value so that you can create results? So fast forward to today, we've got, similar to JPMC, we've got over 28 different large language models that are available to our employees. We have 34 productionized use cases deployed. We have another 80 in the pipeline, about ready to go to production before end of year. We've got 300 in the backlog. And we've got real results as well, not just turning things on. So it's very important for me that if we're talking about change and rewiring, that you also ask yourself, how am I changing? How is my function changing? So in engineering, we are also changing. So we've improved engineering velocity by 13%. And I know you see a lot of headlines with layoffs and whatnot. We decided for us, our workload is so high that we harvested that and redeployed that capacity. And as a result of that, we were able to, for example, in our small commercial product, we've deployed Gen AI capabilities through our engineering pipelines that improved time to quote by 20%. So I could go on because our list is pretty deep, but that just connects the conviction to the results.
I love it. And just very quickly, improved engineering velocity by 13%.
Yeah.
Vibe coding / agentic coding, what role is that playing in your operation today?
So for us, engineering velocity, we connected it to high performance engineering. What is that? Back to the discipline of what are the fundamentals, what capabilities are you deploying, and what bets are you placing?
Yeah.
So very disciplined execution, not just throwing tools out there and using words like vibe coding and then it's 2 people. We've got a 12,000 person engineering shop, so we can't just throw things. So under this umbrella of high performance engineering, we then created those practices. First was standardized tools. The second was modernize the platforms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To answer your question directly about tools, yes, we have deployed GitHub Copilot. We also are doing a proof of concept with Cognition on their Devin product, which is an agentic AI, and we're deploying that specific agent as a junior analyst to work on toil. Software engineering, you've got these repeatable processes that are not differentiating you. And quite frankly, if you're an engineer and you're a software engineer, you don't want to be doing that work anyway. So we partnered with our engineers to say, well, what bodies of work, what tasks within the body of work you do don't actually add value? And we zeroed in on the toil and everything that happens within that. And then we said, okay, here's where we deploy it. So we're very systematically deploying it to create that result.
GE trained you well. Okay. Josh, I'm going to head it back down to you. So big headline in the Wall Street Journal, maybe back in, I don't know, April, May, talking about how you J&J, had 900 experiments that were running simultaneously, which is quite a bit. So how do you, as the co-chair of the CIO Council, how do you think about we're going to just allow people to experiment, and lots of redundant pilots, I assume. How do you manage a process at that scale? And then how do you pull back with just that handful of use cases that you've ultimately landed on and doubled down on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for 2 years, ever since Gen AI really began to take hold, we allowed large-scale experimentation across the enterprise.
Yeah.
It's actually up to 1,500 use cases that have now come through our governance process where they're reviewed by various functions for various purposes. And in that process, through testing and learning and then eventually scaling what works, we picked up on a couple of really important themes. One that you mentioned already, which was that there were a lot of common solution patterns that we observed. So a lot of similar types of use cases, then folks working on similar types of solutions. A lot of it was around the usual summarization, querying, drafting, but then there were also things specific to our industry and company around how do we respond more quickly to complaints that come in about our products? How do we generate evidence for health authorities more rigorously and more quickly as well? So that was one learning. Another really important learning was that with 1,500 use cases, not all of them are really bringing a lot of value. Some of them are very incremental. And so we've taken a deliberate approach as we've implemented that lighthouse strategy to say, let's really focus on the high value use cases. And by that I mean, we have developed an agentic AI roadmap within our centralized IT group to focus on single solutions for those common use cases. And then in that review process where those 1,500 use cases have come through, another really important part of the evolution was that we had a very centralized review, and we tried to push more of the review around the business value. And is this use case going to drive value either for patients, healthcare systems, or the business, back to the business owners or the leaders within those businesses to make that adjudication? Because the centralized review process, one, had the potential to create a bottleneck, but two, didn't have the right people to weigh in on that value piece. So those have been two of the things we've been really focused on in that journey.
That's great. So Brionna, your Chief Data and AI Officer, Teresa Heitensether, if I pronounced that correctly,
Heitzenrether,
has been interviewed by every media outlet in the world about her perspective, and she is all in on AI. And what makes her interesting is she doesn't have a technology background. She's run many large businesses for the bank. And so she says every decision we make is through the lens of how do we make the business more impactful? And she also goes on to say that we're not going to mandate the use of AI. We want there to be so much business value that the JPM employees will actually want to use it. So what business value has this group actually delivered? What are some of the metrics that you can share?
Excellent. I love this. I would say one thing about Teresa Heisman, she has been within the firm for over 20 years, came from securities, so she knows how the sausage gets made. And she really understands not just what does it take to make JPMorgan profitable, but what does it take to keep the data, to keep the countless types of information that the firm has relevant. So to answer that question, I would say JPMorgan has not mandated use of Gen AI, right? There's no checkbox associated with your end-of-year performance that says, how many prompts did you do this year? That doesn't exist. What we have done and what the firm has done with over 250,000 employees has been leading with curiosity. Because again, we have to remember that we are all professionals within the finance space. We consume information, news about Gen AI, the future of finance, et cetera. And then to come into your place of business and to feel like you're being hit over the head with this, AI hammer, no one wants that. You're not gonna have a good time. So instead, by focusing on what are the parts of your everyday that spark curiosity and creativity, and how can we build Gen AI tools within JPMorgan and LLM Suite that further that? And then what are the parts of the workflows that have to happen on a quarterly, annual, weekly basis? And how can we make sure that that happens perhaps through Gen AI as well? So to answer your question, it has been a lot of leading with education. And as part of that education, having people feel like they have skin in the game, giving them access to the roadmap, encouraging people to become beta users and beta testers. That's how you build out this real global federated network of evangelists. That's what we've done at JPMorgan with Gen AI. And it's excellent to see it kind of take off, like fire, like catching a fire throughout the world, as full regions and parts of the business and LOBs are excited to bring to you the business use cases that they found through a hackathon with analysts and associates. Right? Like that's the story of JPMorgan, and that's kind of how the bank is going to stay relevant. And Teresa has mandated that curiosity, I would say, but not the usage.
Great, thank you, Brionna.
Of course.
So Monica, if I had $1 for every time the word agentic AI was mentioned this year, I'd be ahead of Elon Musk and Larry Ellison on the Forbes 400 list, right? Mm-hmm. Paul had spoken earlier about every one of the vendors that they vetted on their buyer's guide claims they have an agentic framework. So let's get down to what's real, right? So Walmart comes out maybe a month or two now and said, we got ahead of our skis a bit, and we rolled out so many agents that we've kind of confused everybody, including our customers. So what lessons can we learn when a company runs nilly-willy into a fad and maybe says, maybe we were a little bit too ambitious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I understand the why, but I think you've got to really connect the culture of the company, the industry you're in, and design what's the best path forward. And so for us, I go back to we're selling a product that if people need it, it's because something bad happened.
Yeah.
And so we're very thoughtful about how we deploy agents, how we touch customers, how we leverage the capabilities. So you'll hear me say a lot about disciplined and having a methodology by which you deploy these things because of the space we're in, and it's probably shared, with both companies here as well. And so that's our mantra is while we have a North Star and similar, we have a roadmap, we understand the maturity level, we also have a disciplined approach. So that's point number one. Point number two is we then say, back to the earlier speaker on mapping out the use cases and the opportunities. For us, we also do that, and we think about, okay, where is judgment needed by a human? Our perspective is that the human will always be at the helm, but maybe not in the loop or on the loop. And those are different for us. We have a delineation on that. And so then you start to connect the dots on where you deploy the agents. And so we've been doing that internally, deploying them internally, and I'll give you an example. We have an agent called Libby, and Libby is your help desk support agent.
Right.
And we use Teams at Liberty Mutual, and so we deployed Libby through Teams. She's reached out to every single 40,000 of our employees around the world simultaneously. We actually tested that load balancing on that, and engaged and said, Libby, introducing what the agent does and how can I help you? And I know, my team was watching this, and at the beginning of the morning, people were testing, and they were like, Libby, how many devices do I have? Because we count that, we manage that. And Libby was going, I don't know. And someone said, well, this is where you go to go find out. Go do that, and then tell me how many devices I have. By that afternoon, we asked the question again, and Libby was able to answer the question.
Wow.
Now we're moving Libby into the space of, we're connecting her to, so this is through ServiceNow, MoveWorks, NextThink is the other platform. So connecting all that together, I see people writing that down. Yeah. Connecting all that together to say, okay, Libby, monitor the devices, and when you see there is an issue happening, engage in a way to actually rectify the situation. So there's an example of an agent. We're deploying other types. We have another one called Sydney, and Sydney is based on a foundation, a knowledge base of how we execute big, large projects and programs at the company. Right. And so we have documented, we do a lot of retrospective, so we document what went well and what didn't go well, and we have a body of work similar to like consulting companies do, yeah. Except ours is all internal. And we then demonstrated, well, what is good look like, what is not great look like, and now we have Sydney sitting on top. So if you're doing a project, small or big, you can engage with Sydney and say, I'm doing this project, I'm having this trouble, what should I do? And Sydney will recommend, you should do this template, you should consider these questions, et cetera. So that's where we're at. Key lessons learned, to answer your question, a couple things. One, you have to do 2 in a box. And what does that mean? That means you cannot be doing this to a user of the service, you have to do it with them. Right. So really make sure you're solving the problem. Right. So that would be one. The second one, which I think you mentioned as well, which was the power of the firm, use a cross-functional expertise. While we run technology and we're an engineering shop, we don't know all the nuances of what happens at the front line. So engaging with everyone across the company and really solving a problem that's going to create value for the company. And I think the other piece is, this is enterprise scale. Yeah. And so what does that mean? There's both functional requirements and non-functional requirements. Think about security, responsibility, the governance, et cetera. Yeah. So those have been some lessons learned.
Thank you. Josh, I'm going to bring it back down to you. So as I travel the world doing executive AI training, a lot of members in the C-suite are very frustrated when you look at sort of the adoption of Gen AI across the organization, right? And there are big gaps. And so the president of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, nicknamed the Viking, which I love, okay? I wish I had that nickname, right? And he's mandated the use of AI. And he's come out and said, if you don't use AI within the bank, you will never be promoted, and quite likely you won't be here much longer, right? So you sit on this Global AI Council. Can you mandate usage in a large enterprise of AI? Is that something that you think might work if organizations are failing to get the adoption rates, sort of the more traditional way? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I appreciate Brianna's response earlier around not necessarily requiring that AI be used, but really incentivizing it when there is a real business need. And that's what we're really focused on. I think there are 3 aspects to that incentivization. One is, first it starts with, is there a business need? And when there is, the teams working on those projects, if we say, AI can help you do this more efficiently or more effectively, that's a win-win. And so that's number 1. Number 2, is ensuring that as much as we can, the tools are embedded within the workflow so they don't have to create their own workarounds. Yeah. So sort of greasing the skids, if you will. And then number 3, and Monica, I think, mentioned this, is making sure we've got the right champions in place at the highest level, but throughout the organization. So it's important that our C-suite be talking about AI. It's also important within each of the functions and business units that we have those champions that are championing the cause, but the selection of those people is critical. The people that are really going to be promoters are the ones that are going to be most effective. as Brionna mentioned, everyone comes into the workplace having read and heard a lot about AI externally, and they've all had their own experience internally within the workplace with AI. So they've all got their own opinion. So really finding those promoters and trying to work with the detractors through some of that. But I think so much of it really comes down to that prioritization and making sure that first we're leading with the business need and the business case.
Being cognizant of time, we're going to do a lightning round really quickly. I'm just going to ask you for a one-sentence response.
Okay.
I'm going to come down the row, starting with you, Josh. So we all have to be aware of the things that we maybe haven't done what would have been the best at the time, but that's what we did. What's the one thing you would hope that J&J might have done differently in retrospect?
I mentioned before we engaged the business units in that review process. I think we did it the right time. We could have done it sooner. Biggest thing is to avoid bottlenecks in your governance, because once you create a bottleneck, you may never catch up.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Brionna.
I would say, I think one of the things that JPMorgan at the very, very beginning of the journey could have done better would be maybe to collect information and just to collect, again, on that curiosity point, some information around what are people finding the most value in, where do they want their business to go. Now, obviously, that's baked into what we're doing going forward, but in that kind of silent point between ChatGPT and LLM Suite, we did a lot of research, but I think you can always do more.
That's great. Thank you, Monica.
Change management. I would say digital transformation. I always use a rule of thumb that the amount of dollars you invest to do the project, it should be 1-to-1 to the change management work you have to do. Gen AI, I think the rule of thumb is 1-to-3.
Yep.
So the work you're going to do, you invest $1, $3 for change management. While we were doing that, could have done that earlier and had a real approach to doing it in a more holistic way.
Okay. Next question, I'm going to start with you.
Oh.
And that is, as you think about, you talked about your roadmap, obviously only what you can share publicly.
Yeah.
But what's the next major milestone as you go forward?
The next arc of what we're doing it's threefold. One is we've got to do this core system modernization at a much accelerated pace. The second piece is next-gen data strategy. Cold storage, archive, not going to be good enough. You need that data. Third is all about the AI backbone and building AI capabilities across all the layers of your stack.
Yep.
And not just thinking that GPT is good enough. You've got to actually build it everywhere. Infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Brionna.
I would say, well, JPMorgan right now, it's fundamentally rewiring itself to be an AI bank and to be a bank with AI at the center. A lot of that you're going to see more of on the roadmap. Also introducing ways to bring more agentic experiences to different parts of the business. And lastly, I would say, do not be surprised if in the next year or so you see an increased investment, especially in the engineering resources. The firm already has hundreds of people working across Gen AI, but we really are trying to think how can we bring the best world-class talent globally into the firm to build our AI story.
Great, thank you. Josh?
For us at J&J, it's also agentic, but it's really bolstering the foundation of data, tech, and talent to make sure that we're set up to really bring forward the value of agentic AI.
That's great. Paul, I want to land this thing on time, so let me thank Monica, Brionna, and Josh for your insight. Thank you, guys. Thank you.